Hello, and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos.
I'm Haiti Adams at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Joke Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
The federal government has signed contracts for the dredging of the River Benue and River Niger. The Minister for Water Resources, Mr. Suleiman Adamu, gave this indication while fielding questions from journalists during his visit to Benue State to commission the Lower Benue River Basin Development Authority's rice processing plant and the pilot Songhai integrated farm practices in Makurdi, the Benue State capital. Mr. Adamu is confident that the projects will address the flooding challenges in the country and provide irrigation for farmers.
Activities pick up at the Lower Benue River Basin Development Authority in Makurdi, the Benue State capital, when the Minister for Water Resources, Mr. Suleiman Adamu, came calling. The two projects ready for commissioning of the 16 tons per hour rice processing and packaging plant and the Songhai integrated farm practice, which has poultry, fishery and greenhouse farms.
This is a very serious assignment.
He also laid the foundation for additional office building for over 100 staff. The minister later held a meeting with the management and staff of the federal government agency.
The river basins, as far as I'm concerned, you have no business being here if you cannot expand the capacity of agriculture. If you do not provide more irrigable land, if you are not enablers for farmers around you to learn, to improve. And that is why we restored the agricultural services, restored the extension service, so that we can be relevant to the farmers around us.
We have been able to establish two Songhai farms. The one we have in Makurdi, we have just commissioned, is more or less a pilot. The really big one is at Doma, covering where we have 50 hectares of land earmarked for it. But presently, we are only developing 6 hectares.
Mr. Adamu also gives update on the plan to dredge rivers Niger and Benue.
We have initiated the process. In the long run, that might help with flood control, improve navigation, maybe even reclaim some land for irrigation purposes and tourism. But believe me, it's like in every other huge infrastructure endeavor like this, water resources endeavor, this is something that is going to take a long, long time to achieve.
While the contract for River Benue is awarded at the cost of 50 million euros, the contract for dredging River Niger is awarded at the cost of $14 billion. The contractors are expected to deliver over the next 20 months.
Let's get more on this. Joining us on the program is the Commissioner for Rural Development in Benue State, Victor Okaha. He joins us via Zoom from Makurdi, the state capital. Thank you so much for joining us today on Africa 54.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Right, so could you paint a picture of how the effects of the now shallow and silted River Benue, which has been a source of Benue flooding, how it has been for farmers in the area?
Yeah, thank you so much. The shallowing of the Benue River has been a great source of problem for people in Benue and its environs. The River Benue flows from Adamawa Hills down through Makurdi. So it crosses Adamawa, Taraba, Benue, Kogi, through Benue before joining Niger in Lokoja, Kogi. The siltation of the river over the years has been a big problem, particularly in the last few years, where a lot of flooding has been experienced. In 2012, there was much flooding here. And last year, 2022, there was also much flooding that caused losses in farmland, homesteads for people. as a personal experience, I lost large farmlands of rice, both in Makudi and in Bajimba, where I personally farmed and where I also had organized over 80 cooperative societies to get involved in rice farming. All of these farms were lost by reason of the flooding. And as a professional, I foresee that the losses were largely due to the fact that the riverbed has become so shallow that it is not capable of containing waters, particularly when they are released from the Lagdo Dam.
So contracts for the survey plan for the dredging have been awarded. What should the handlers look out for based on your experience?
The handlers of the contracts need to do some work in planning the activities of their dredging. This planning will involve studies in environmental studies like EIA, which would dovetail into production of an environmental plan. The environmental plan actually does a work in trying to mitigate impacts that were identified in the environmental studies, which is the EIA. They also need to engage in safety studies, security studies, and also community studies, because the activities will interface with community people who live along the banks of the Benue River. So essentially, part of their planning will need to do studies in this area that I have mentioned. They will also need to look at technical issues in terms of bringing in equipment to do the work. That will require looking at dry and wet plants, which will involve trying to select dredging equipment that will get involved in the work. The dry plants will be things like excavators, bulldozers, and other equipment that will ferry sand that is dredged so that it is dumped or put in areas that are necessary for it. So they will need to do those studies. They also need to look at managing their resources, finances, in doing the dredging. Dredging involves a lot of money. We need to spend money on overheads, paying people. We need to spend money on running equipment, which may be hired or bought. This will require repairs. It will require funding, fuels that will give the energy for this work to be done. So the people who will be doing the dredging work will need to look at all of this. They will need to look at issues of people management, interfaces with communities, and people's safety, because in working, people will have interfaces with the environment, they will have interfaces with equipment that are working, and then working over water is a great hazard. It will result in a loss of lives if not well managed. So these are areas that people who are going to do the dredging work will need to manage.
Right, since the work has not yet started, what is being done to mitigate the effects of flooding for, people living along the riverbanks, and seeing that, delivery is also between 20 to 30 years?
The riverbed has become greatly silted and is very much shallow. As a child growing in Makudi here 50 years ago, in 1970, what I see of the River Benue today is a great difference. As a child, fishing along the banks of the River Benue in the 1970s, I saw much water. Today, it looks like you can trek from one side of the river to the other in dry season like now. I'm really shocked by the difference that I have seen just in 50 years of siltation of the riverbed. So, talking about what can be done to minimize the flooding is sensitization of people who understand that there are hazards, there are dangers with respect to flooding of the river. And people need to be aware that at certain times of the season, the river will flood. And they need to move out early. Like for myself personally, this year, I'm not going to farm because I have been told that this year there will be flooding too. So if I go to farm along the banks of the river, I'm making room to have losses. So people need to be sensitized, information given to them so that the areas where they farmed and the floods came and washed off their farms, they need to stay away from there and farmers where the flood will not come. In the years to come, when the river has been dredged and the amount of the water will be contained in the riverbed, we can get back to farming in those areas. This will bring a lot of losses to people because a lot of people will not be able to farm because there are only available farmlands where along the riverbank. But largely, what can be done now is in the area of giving out information and sensitizing people to stay away from farming in those areas that were flooded over the years. They have experience, so they know that in 2012, when we planted here, we had floods. When we lived here, our homes were overrun. Last year, they also had that experience. So if you live in those areas, plan to evacuate when signals are given that the floods are coming.
Right. Commissioner for Rural Development in Benue State, Victor Okaha, would like to thank you for your time on Africa 54 today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
U.S. forces are training West African troops to counter the growing terror threat spreading from the Sahel. Meanwhile, security experts say Burkina Faso and Mali have essentially fallen to terrorist groups, meaning the U.S. and security partners are now looking at containment over prevention of the Sahel conflict. Henry Wilkins reports from Sogakope in Ghana.
Troops from Morocco and Ghana get ready for an over-the-beach raid as part of Flintlock, the annual US-led military exercise in West Africa, which this year took place in Ivory Coast and Ghana. A soldier from the Ghanaian Special Boat Service, who declined to be named for security reasons, described the exercises.
It's been 2 weeks of intensive training, and some of the areas included mission planning, visit board seizure and search, VBSS, tactical site exploitation. We did sensitive site exploitation.
One of the US officers running the exercise hinted that Ghana had a big role to play in security efforts, as a long-running conflict with groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State militants spread to the north of coastal West African countries.
We are concerned, of course, with the terror threat coming from the north, and Flintlock is absolutely about pulling our partners together to help protect against that threat. I think from the international community, we're really focused on Ghana. Ghana is a center of stability and real capability in coastal West Africa.
Analysts say US security efforts are shifting focus from landlocked countries to the north, like Burkina Faso and Mali, to coastal West Africa. The Burkina Faso and Mali governments have struggled to halt attacks and military advances by militant groups, leading to instability in both countries. Asked whether the conflict against terror groups in Burkina Faso has essentially already been lost, one expert replied,
I think to a large extent we can say that. There's still a government in Mali and there's still a government in Burkina Faso, and they still control some areas. But I think the reality is that large portions of the populations in these countries are no longer under government control.
Annalise Bernard of Strategic Stabilization Advisors is a former advisor to the US Department of State's Bureau for Conflict and Stabilization Operations in Niger. She told VOA that the US appears to be increasingly looking to contain the terror threat from the Sahel instead of trying to prevent it.
I do think that a version of containment is going to start to take place at a more aggressive level, wherein we start to fortify the northern borders of those coastal West African states that I mentioned, ensure that all the other coastal states also remain as strong as possible, but keep our key alliance in Niger.
Analysts say that the US is paying more attention to the Sahel conflict as great powers like Russia and China begin to show more interest and influence in the region. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Sogakope, Ghana.
Sanctions on entities within major fertilizer exporter Russia after the invasion of Ukraine and a jump in the price of gas, key in the manufacture of nitrogen products, have pushed up prices of crop nutrients globally in the last year. The Food and Agriculture Organization has named Zimbabwe, Malawi and Angola as countries in the Southern Africa region facing food insecurity due to reduced fertilizer use.
Helplessly walking through her failed maize fields after waiting for months for free fertilizer from government, Malawian farmer Hawa Firi is left with no harvest. The smallholder farmer is one of many across Malawi's Kwenda area, 35 kilometers from the capital Lilongwe, who has struggled to buy fertilizer during the 2022-23 planting season after prices spiked following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
As villagers, we do not have anything that will bring us money except for farming only. My plea to the government is to speed up the process of selling the subsidized fertilizer in good time, mainly for those of us that depend on farming.
According to Agriculture Minister Sam Kawale, in Malawi, maize output is seen falling 4% this year after the government's affordable inputs program struggled to keep up with price increases. Fertilizer prices in Malawi have more than doubled in the past year, with a 50-kilogram bag retailing at 75,000 kwacha, putting pressure on the government's 109 billion kwacha budget for the input support program. Malawi was one of the first African countries to receive the donated fertilizer through the World Food Program, part of 260,000 tons of the Russian firm's fertilizer stocked in several European ports.
This is going to help the 400,000 farmers who would have been left out of the program because of the devaluation and the increase in fertilizer prices. So we are extremely grateful for Eurochem's donation.
We believe that it is very high time for the Western countries to unblock Russian food and fertilizers impounded in some port of Western countries, so we could continue delivering agricultural products to Africa and to other parts of the world. It's very important. We live up to the commitments and we keep our word. So what happens now in Malawi is a clear demonstration that Russia can deliver despite the challenges and threats of the new geopolitical situation.
But for Zawani Maludi, a 45-year-old Malawian smallholder farmer who received some of the donated Russian fertilizer, help came too late. She and other smallholder farmers can only hope that sanctions against benefactor countries will end soon and passage for fertilizer will be opened up.
It's time now for a short break. As we do, remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come on the program. When artist Adebayo Ayodeji realized an important aspect of Nigeria's culture could become extinct, he decided to do something about it. His drumming workshops in Lagos teaches children to play drums and to understand their significance in African tradition.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Heidi Adams in Washington. As the Horn of Africa enters its sixth failed rainy season, the number of internally displaced people in Somalia has reached an all-time high, with millions forced to leave their homes. Abdul Kadir Zubair visited the camp for the displaced in Dolo, Somalia, and has the story narrated by Salam Solomon.
Sheltering from the scorching sun under a tree with her 3 children, Marian Ali Aden is waiting to be given a temporary place to stay. Aden was forced to leave her home in Waji district of Somalia's Bakol region.
The problem that brought us here is that we lost our farms and livestock to the severe drought. Their father used to bring us some food, but it wasn't available anymore. And after we lost everything, we had to flee.
Aid agencies such as the UN's International Organization for Migration, or IOM, say the town of Dolo, near the Somalia-Ethiopia border where Aden arrived, is seeing an influx of people fleeing the multi-year drought that began in 2020. This is Ladang camp for the internally displaced, home to more than 180,000 people. IOM says it has added 3 displacement camps to house more people. Hassan Mohammed Gabo is with the International Organization for Migration.
As you can see, 15 families have arrived in these 3 new camps in 2 days. And the number of people arriving is increasing every day. We ask donors, the government and businesses to reach out and assist these people as soon as possible. Otherwise, the situation will get worse.
The IOM has also built a camp for the displaced in Barwago. A mother of 7, Faduma Ali Ado, lost one of her children on the perilous journey to the camp.
I fled from my home after the drought hit our farm and we lost all our animals. We walked for 7 days and I lost one of my kids on the way here. The only animal we brought here was a donkey. Then we sold it to buy food for my children. They have given me this house I live in now.
IOM's Deputy General of Operations Ugochi Daniels visited a camp in Baidoa and says the impact of the drought is widespread.
Baidoa has received the most internally displaced people in Somalia, but all of Somalia is also affected by conflict as well as by climate change.
The UN says the number of displaced people in Somalia has reached 3.8 million people this year. While humanitarian assistance is reaching some parts of Somalia, aid groups say immediate and sustained intervention at a large scale is required to prevent further displacement and a loss of life. For Abdul Qadir Zubair in Dolo, Somalia, Salim Solomon, VOA News.
Here in Nigeria, artist Adebayo Ayodeji is targeting children to play traditional instruments like drums, which he is worried could become extinct and erase an important aspect of the culture in Africa's most populous country. His twice-monthly drumming workshops in the commercial city of Lagos sees parents bring their children to learn how to play drums and understand their significance in African tradition.
In Nigeria, the drum is not only a musical instrument, but is used in events and rituals like communicating with deities and summoning meetings in villages, just like a telephone. But less of this is now seen because of technology.
We are using this to revive our culture, our cultural values. Most of them they've not seen this kind of drum before. They've not played it before, and this is an opportunity to introduce them to it. So we're using it to at least do a kind of evangelism of art.
Nigeria holds an African drum festival every April, hosting drummers from around the world, showcasing the beauty and sounds of the drum. Deborah Chat-Dauda is a Nigerian-American researcher and a Fulbright Fogarty Fellow living in Nigeria. She brought her son to the workshop.
If we work together to ensure that our children have access
to activities like this, that our parents and the community as a whole comes together to ensure that we can, as a people, contribute to our culture and our heritage. Culture is fluid, it's always transforming, and we have to have ways where we can document, we can also archive, and also incorporate our children in what we do.
From less than 10 children the first time Ayodeji started the workshop, he says they've grown to over 30 children attending each session, and all by word of mouth.
I'm glad that I was able to experience and being able to play those kind of drums. And I remember he bought me one of those drums when I was younger to play on, and then I broke it.
When you have 10 children playing with you, those 10 children will have friends. So they will invite their friend. Imagine 10 inviting two friends, that makes us 30. And by the time they come, we invite their parents to come and see the performance. They see the positive of what we're doing, and then they let their children join us.
The 42-year-old has been playing the drum professionally for over 15 years and also runs a troupe of dancers and drummers comprising of children he took off the street.
And that is our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Do check it out. I'm Haiti Adams in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
We look forward to bringing you another edition next week. To remember that channelcv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joke Rogers. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.